When most people think of fasting, they think of not eating. They think of abstaining from food. But in Islam, aka opposite world, fasting means gorging yourself with food multiple times per day.
Let's start with the prophets. Ramadan is not a custom or tradition that was observed by any of the prophets that preceded Muhammad. When we compare Ramadan with the fasting observed by the people of the book, that is, the Jews and Christians, Ramadan really just becomes a rearranging of meal times as opposed to true fasting.
Islamic fasting is what we would ordinarily call feasting.
You see, throughout the Bible, fasting is observed for various reasons. This could include repentance, requesting forgiveness of sins, mourning. It was also a way to make supplication to God, and much more. Fasting is done to deliberately seek the face and mercy of God, thus getting closer to Him. This is accomplished by abstaining from food, drinks, and all other forms of fleshly desires, not just sex. Furthermore, fasting can be done on an individual basis or in groups, and it can last as long as a day or longer as deemed necessary by the participants. When we compare true fasting to Ramadan, we find that Ramadan isn't really about abstinence or sacrifice. Instead, excessive amounts of food and drink are merely consumed during the night rather than the day.
Now imagine having 2 Thanksgiving dinners per day, every day, for an entire month, and calling it fasting.
Ramadan really just shifts the times for having food, drink, and sex from daytime to nighttime during that month. This doesn't line up at all with the customs already observed by the biblical prophets. But this shouldn't be a surprise, because Allah's messenger said to me, the most beloved fasting to Allah was the fasting of the prophet David, who used to fast on alternate days. And the most beloved prayer to Allah was the prayer of David, who used to sleep for the first half of the night and pray for 1/3 of it, and again sleep for a 1/6 of it. The scriptures never mention King David fasting on alternate days or having an altered sleep schedule for the sake of praying. Clearly, Muhammad was totally clueless when it came to the topic of fasting as described in the Bible.
Strange use of the word fasting, isn't it? Fasting is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, the most essential practices of the religion. Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic lunar calendar. Muslims who aren't exempt for some reason are required to abstain from food, beverages, and sexual intercourse from dawn to sunset for the entire month. But once the sun goes down, it's party time.
Let's take a look at the origins of Ramadan and how Muhammad developed his ideology of fasting in the first place. Looking back at Al-Baqarah verse 185, we are told that Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed. By this logic, Muhammad should have been fasting either before or while the Quran was being revealed to him. Sahih 6982. He, Muhammad, used to go in seclusion to the cave of Hira, where he used to worship Allah alone continuously for many days and nights. He used to take with him the journey food for that stay, and then come back to his wife Khadija to take his food likewise again for another period to stay, till suddenly the truth descended upon him while he was in the cave of Hira. What I find really interesting is that many of the major prophets of the Bible experienced significant episodes of prolonged fasting, which proved to be vital to their ministries. Moses, Elijah, King David, even Christ himself, all of these individuals fasted as means of spiritual transformation and fulfillment before God. But the same can't be said for Muhammad.
Muslims claim that they follow Jesus. They say, we follow Jesus more than you Christians. Now, what they really mean when they say this is that they follow what Muhammad said about Jesus. They claim to follow all the prophets, but they're just following what one false prophet said about all the prophets. So at the end of the day, they're still following one false prophet and no one else.
Fasting was already well practiced in the Arabic community, even before the rise of Islam. The pagans of Quraysh had already been used to fasting during the Ashra day, in the times of ignorance, that is, before Islam was revealed. Narrated Aisha, during the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, the Quraysh used to observe fasting on the day of Ashra, and the Prophet himself used to observe fasting on it too. But when he came to Medina, he fasted on that day and ordered the Muslims to fast on it. When the order of compulsory fasting in Ramadan was revealed, fasting in Ramadan became an obligation, and fasting on Ashra was given up, and whoever wished to fast on it did so, and whoever did not wish to fast on it did not fast. Much like the many other customs that Muhammad mimicked from the surrounding polytheistic tribes, Ramadan's true origins are, unsurprisingly, pagan. Muhammad observed the polytheistic Quraysh fasting on the day of Ashra and decided to follow these practices, while also commanding his own followers to do the same.
They definitely don't follow the Lord Jesus Christ, who was the all-time king of exposing religious hypocrisy. In Matthew 6, Jesus condemns religious practices that are meant to impress other people, acts of righteousness that are just for show. He talks about giving to charity and prayer, and then he says this about fasting. Matthew 6, verses 16 through 18. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. Notice, Jesus condemns fasting that's meant to be seen by others. If you're fasting in order to earn a reputation for righteousness, your reputation is the only reward you get, according to Jesus. Apart from that reward, your fasting is worthless. Imagine a religion that demands, as one of its 5 pillars of orthodox practice, an entire month of public fasting. It's not fasting in private. It's not fasting in secret. It's fasting that everyone sees and knows about and talks about. You're praised if you do it and blamed if you don't. You literally announce to the entire world that you're fasting. That would be bad enough. But imagine what Jesus would think of this public fasting if it weren't even fasting. Imagine the level of contempt Jesus would have for a religious practice of public fasting that isn't even fasting. In other words, imagine a religion that encourages people to pretend to fast and to praise each other for fasting, even though they're actually gorging themselves with food multiple times per day. Jesus criticized people who were actually fasting, but who wanted other people to know that they were fasting. He called them hypocrites, even though they were fasting. How much worse is it to want other people to think that you're fasting when you definitely aren't? It's a double hypocrisy. Hypocrisy for not actually fasting, and hypocrisy for wanting a reputation as someone who fasts. If you made a list of everything Jesus said not to do as part of your religion, and you rolled it all up into a giant ball, you'd get Islam. The main question that remains is, why is Islam like this?
Take a look at this hadith. Narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet came to Medina and saw the Jews fasting on the day of Ashra. He asked them about that. They replied, "This is a good day, the day on which Allah rescued Bani Israel from their enemy. So Moses fasted this day." The Prophet said, "We have more claim over Moses than you." So the Prophet fasted on that day and ordered the Muslims to fast on that day.
Ritual should not come from a Jew walking in the street to a prophet. Ritual should come from God. If the God of Muhammad said to him, "You fast this day," then the God of Muhammad said to him, "Fast this day." And that explains why he is fasting. But Muhammad, he see a Jew in the street, and he asked him, "Why you are fasting?" He said, "This is the day of Ashura." And just because they fast Ashura, he fasted. Read carefully. This is Sahih Bukhari. The Muslim, they cannot say, the drama they have, weak and strong and fat, and vitamin D and E is missing. The Prophet came to the Medina. Medina is a city which is called Yathrib, the Jewish city. And when Muhammad later killed them all and took the city as usual. And he saw the Jews fasting on the day of Ashura. Who was fasting according to the story here? The Jews. He asked them about that. And here clear evidence that Muhammad, he do not know what is that. Because if I know, I will not ask you what is this, right? So he asked the Jews, "What is this?" They replied, "This is a good day, the day which Allah rescued Bani Israel, the children of Israel, from their enemy. So Moses fasted in this day." The Prophet said, "We have more claim over Moses than you." So the Prophet fasted on that day and ordered the Muslim to fast that day. Do you see it? Do we have any Muslim can explain to us how Muhammad, he take his ritual from the Jews? So Muhammad was looking for a fasting day, and he don't have one. He claimed to be a prophet, but he have nothing. He don't have rituals yet. He left the Kaaba. He have no Kaaba no more.
Islam doesn't teach people to control their desires. Islam encourages people, the men especially, to carry their desires to perverse extremes. But it only allows them to satisfy these desires within an Islamic framework, thus trapping people with their own desires and using these desires in the service of the religion. For instance, if a non-Muslim man goes clubbing regularly and has sex with 100 different women, Islam will condemn him as a fornicator. But if this same man converts to Islam and joins the jihad movement, he can marry 4 women and take home sex slaves after every battle and be perfectly righteous before Allah, even if he has sex with 100 different women. Notice, same desire in both cases, sex with lots of women. But one is acceptable and the other is unacceptable, based on whether it's advantageous to Islam. Likewise, if a psychopath goes on a killing spree, he's surely going to hell, according to Islam. Unless, of course, he goes on a killing spree as a terrorist attack for the sake of Allah as part of the Ramadan bombathon, in which case his violent massacre will earn him a one-way ticket to paradise, where he'll spend eternity deflowering virgins. Should we be surprised that Ramadan is a month-long series of gluttonous feasts that Muslims call fasting and view as one of their highest religious duties? Not at all. When Muhammad is your prophet, you don't have someone who can give sight to the blind or raise the dead. You only get one miracle. What's the one miracle in Islam? It's this. Islam takes behavior that's normally regarded as selfish and harmful and miraculously transforms it into the will of God.
It just backfired on you. It just backfired on you. This is a part of a religion. There's a reason to it. Yeah?